The early game on Saturday sees Spurs take on Newcastle. It's been well reported, hasn't it? The number of injuries that Spurs have picked up so far this season. Is it luck or is it something to do with Ange Postecoglou's tactics? This is the Spurs coach addressing that.
And when you talk about the things you're looking at to try and change it, I know you don't ever want to change your style of play because it's something you truly believe in and that's the philosophy of you and this club now. But would injuries be a factor that maybe would force you to change it? Would you look at that? Would you say maybe 10, 15%? Because we all know the running data here is top level as well.
Yeah. Look, there is always the opportunity for change, and the one constant with me is that I'm not going to in terms of my beliefs. So, but there's always a reason to change, and there's always the opportunity to change for everybody. So I guess it just comes down to how much you believe in what you're doing and how much you believe what you're doing will bring success.
There's opportunity for change, but I'm not going to do it.
You keep asking me, and I'm keep telling you, I'm 18 months now I've been talking about this, and I'm sick to death of it.
You actually brought up an interesting point to me about how this was actually brought up during his time at Celtic.
Well, it's not my digging that found it. It was an ex-colleague of mine, Johnny Blaine, who's a big Spurs fan. Actually, he's a hurting Spurs fan. But I was on the side of the fence where these injuries are maybe unfortunate. But there was an article in one of the Scottish newspapers from 2021, his time at Celtic, where he admitted that there was a lot of the Celtic players had muscular and stroke hamstring injuries, and that he literally admitted in the interview that it was his training methods that he was finding it difficult to protect the players.
Right.
Because he had a very rigid way of doing things. He trained them hard. You watch the way they play hard. The fullbacks sprint 70, 80 yards to go forward, and we saw a doggy doing it the other night and getting injured. So I'm kind of 50-50 on this one, because this is not a new thing. Now, when he was at Celtic, when you had 3 or 4 key players out with a hamstring injury or a muscular injury, the chances are in the Scottish Premiership you could get away with it.
Sure.
Right? Because of the strength and depth. At Tottenham, generally you cannot. So I'm kind of on the fence here with, is it his training methods and the way they approach games, or is it just unlucky? The amount of muscular injuries here would suggest there's a little bit more to it than just, Mickey van de Ven's got hamstring problems, Destiny Doggy's got hamstring problems. And so these articles are there for a reason. And sometimes they do come back to haunt you a little bit. If you're flogging your players, and we always talk in this show about player welfare these days, lack of rest, the amount of games, and that's a very difficult juggling act for a manager. And if you're not giving these players enough rest and you're taking them out and you want them to still train as hard as they'd go and play 2 or 3 days later on a Saturday, and then you're doing that, and then all of a sudden 3 or 4 of them are pulling up with hamstrings, that's on you.
Yes.
That's on the manager. So my point is here, there's a little bit of evidence to suggest that this is not just Tottenham players being unlucky with injury, and some of it might fall at the manager's feet. And if that's the case, he's already under pressure, he could have some big problems.
To that point, Jan, obviously we know the sports science, the vest, the red zone, the green zone, and all this sort of stuff. Surely we're at a stage where it's not guesswork anymore. You know when your players are vulnerable.
Absolutely. And just to add to what Craig is saying there, because sometimes a club could be unlucky. Somewhat you can have things. There could be things happening in a club. But what we do know about Tottenham is that when we work with Tottenham, if you work with Postecoglou, you have to love him. He's a great character. You love that kind of guy. But if you see, there is a pattern of facts as well. Craig had something there with the Celtic thing. We had the same discussion of set pieces. We had the same discussion about him not bringing his own staff, never have a plan B. So this man is turning into a lovely, very stubborn man. And I think that you can, because he was asked now, will you change? And he said, yeah, but I won't. Yeah, but I have my belief. He always says, I believe. it's good to believe, and the best coaches in the world has always believed in their philosophy and the way they are doing things. But I think that his management, his leadership now is all down to him. Now, I won't change. But, I mean, if you're walking through the nature and there is a big mountain, you can't say my map is what I believe in if there is a mountain ahead of you. And I think that if you see now with Postecoglou, there is 4 or 5 things now that is like building up. And his answer is always, well, this is what I believe in. And I don't think that that is the path to success if your only answer is, I believe in this.
Here's the exact... I've got the exact headline here. Ange Postecoglou admits Celtic injuries, this is interesting, comes from training demands as he insists it's not possible to protect players. This is in print. He admits the injuries are coming from the excessive training. Now, back in the good old days, we'd brush these things aside about red zone and lactic acid and sports science, primarily because we didn't have much of it. I'm tired. Just get out there and train. Now, I don't know whether this is to be fact or not, but is he ignoring the advice coming from the medical department? And is he brushing it aside? Well, so-and-so's got this problem here, so-and-so's got this problem. If he's saying, well, I don't care, we're training and that's it, then you're overriding your medical department. Not suggesting he is, but if the two are not working in tandem, then you get an injury list like this. And the last thing he needs, and I agree with Jan, there's so much to like about the guy. There's so much to like about the way they play football, so much to like about how they entertain. But unfortunately for him, there's going to come a time if he doesn't get it right, he's just going to become another manager out the revolving door at Tottenham. And if all this is true, and he is buckling the squad because of the way that he's making them train, he's only got himself to blame. And they've got Newcastle tomorrow, who are in very good form. They have a few injuries, and it's looking likely, not sure, looking likely that Tottenham are going to be struggling again tomorrow, and that's just going to pile more pressure on Daniel Levy to possibly make a decision on Postecoglou's future.
He has reported there's a sickness as well in the Spurs camp that is doing the rounds.
Is that his fault?
I'm sure that some could find a way of making it so. Newcastle are favourites, in fact, going to North London to take on Spurs. Of course, they look so good in that opening half against Manchester United. Looking at this, Newcastle a nice run at the moment, aren't they, Jan, as Craig mentioned? Of course, a bit of a stuttering start. They were my pick to finish in the top 4, and I would stand by that at the moment.
Yeah, one of the stories of the season, because they started well without starting well. They got points, and then they had a terrible period, and then there was something wrong with Eddie Howe. Will they change around? And then suddenly the Saudis forgotten that they owned Newcastle United, and everybody thought they would buy Messi, Ronaldo, Neymar, and myself. I mean, there were so many things that were this season with Newcastle. Now they are on a great run again. Having said that, Manchester United, I mean, what's the story from that game? That Newcastle were fantastic the first 30 minutes, or Manchester United were terrible. But Newcastle, they found a way now that just shows you that when you have a good manager, and I rate Eddie Howe, if you have a good manager and if you are calm, then you always will find back to your kind of basic philosophy, how you want to play, which is interesting for the game tomorrow, because then you play Tottenham against Newcastle, and you have no idea what kind of Tottenham team will come out there in terms of personal. That's one thing because of the injury list, but also will there be the fantastic team and will there be that terrible team? But Newcastle steady Eddie, they have their steady Eddie quite literally with Eddie Howe.
If Tottenham are opened up again tomorrow, like they have been in the last few games, you know, you got the real heart of Newcastle's this sort of Joe Linton, Tonali, Guimaraes. You got Anthony Gordon on one side, pacey. You got Jacob Murphy on the other side, pacey. You got the very clever Alexander Isaks up front. If Tottenham leave themselves open again, as they have done in many games, and this Newcastle side take them apart, he's not going to see Monday morning.
I think he will.
No, I don't think he will.
Right. I think he'll be okay because those Liverpool games. I think he could take it up to that.
I mean, that might be his worst nightmare.
You think he'll be fired, Craig?
Sorry,
Craig. You think he will be fired?
Well,
short term.
Well, look, I'm not saying I agree with that, but I'm saying Daniel Levy is a man who is quite happy to point the finger somewhere else when it's all gone pear-shaped. And at the moment, Jan, the Tottenham fans are particularly unhappy with the way every team that they play, pretty much, is opening them up with consummate ease.
Yeah,
and I don't... I'm not necessarily agreeing with it, but he's leaving himself so open, excuse the pun, in terms of where he is and his team, that Levy may indeed do something. I mean, let's be honest, his worst case scenario is to have a semi-final with 2 legs against Liverpool as well. Maybe 1 leg, but not 2.